Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Isobel Ross, and I'm the coach at Peak Endurance Coaching. Episode 155, can you believe we're up to that already, is another interview with the brilliant author Matt Fitzgerald. I've previously interviewed him about his books 80-20, which discusses the concept of how running easy for 20% of your training is the best thing to do and hard for 20%. His book, How Bad Do You Want It?, which delved into the topic of mindset and mental toughness. And also the Comeback Quotient, which talked about athletes turning bad situations around and achieving well despite that. His latest book is called Run Like a Pro, Even If You're Slow, Elite Tools and Tips for Runners of Every Level. I contacted him. He was happy to have a chat about it, and that's what this podcast is. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. I really appreciate those of you who have taken the time to get onto Apple Podcasts to rate and review the pod. I read all of the reviews, and they sure do inspire me to keep working on it. Thanks so much. Now, if you have enjoyed this episode, please do go on over and rate and review. I, of course, suggest 5 stars, but hey, you decide. Also, don't forget to go to my website, peakendurancecoaching.com.au, to get on my email list so you can get my newsletters full of interesting articles and tips. And you will also find out about a live night I'll be doing in July, all about developing mental toughness training for ultra racing and trail racing. I really hope you enjoy this interview with Matt. I certainly did. Hi, Matt, and welcome back to the Peak Endurance Podcast.
Great to be back.
Now, of course, you've come back on because I just recently read your latest book, Run Like a Pro, in brackets, even if you're slow, and I just had to hear more about it from you. So I thought, might as well see if you come on. And once again, you're very happy to come on, so that's great. Can you just tell us a little bit about the idea behind the title of the book?
Sure. Yeah. So, I guess if I have an overarching philosophy of endurance sports and the quest to improve and fulfill your potential as any type of endurance athlete, whether you started young or got into it at an older age, or you're naturally gifted, or you're more of a back of the pack type. I believe in what I call a best practices approach to that quest to improve, which means emulate the elites. The best are the best, similar to any other profession. Honestly, if you look at arts, science, the military, business, that best practices approach is there's a lot to be said for it. Science is great, and I'm into science, and I pay a lot of attention to science, and there's a good deal of science in that book. But that real world focus on, look at the people who have best solved the problem of maximizing your potential as an endurance athlete. Well, those are the Olympians. I, even as an athlete myself, that was always like, granted, we have to scale things down to our level. But the general principles I have always believed apply to everyone. And in 2017, I tried a little experiment, just sort of putting my money where my mouth was. I spent an entire summer living and training with a team of professional runners in Flagstaff, Arizona, here in the States. And at that time, I was 46 years old. And even when I was 26, I was not an elite level athlete. But I just went all in, just doing things the way they did it. My hope was to prove that, even if you're not young and super gifted, you can benefit from modeling your approach to improving after that of the elites. And I had just a transformative experience in that summer, and really came away feeling like, yeah, it's true. Like what I've always believed is true. I ran my fastest marathon of my life. I had run more than 40 marathons. I hadn't broken my PB in 9 years. And again, I was 46 years old. But I set a PB in the 2017 Chicago Marathon.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book about that experience, which is called Running the Dream. But I followed up with this book because Running the Dream is really about my story. And I wanted to collaborate with Ben Rosario, the coach of the NAZ elite team that I trained with that summer, to make something more prescriptive. It's like, well, not all of us can spend a summer, training with a team of professional runners, but what's the next best thing?
Yeah.
And this book really represents that.
You talk about being a fan of the sport, and I guess being a fan of the sport, you're more likely to know what they're doing and what the elite runners are doing. Would that be right?
Exactly. Yeah, in the first chapter of the book, I share kind of a laundry list of reasons. Because it was I started running when I was 11 years old, but I became a fan of elite running at that same age. In fact, it was the great American marathoner Joan Benoit Samuelson who really was my first hero in the sport. She won the gold medal in the first ever women's Olympic marathon in 1984. And I just thought she walked on water, so at the same time I became a runner, I was also a fan of the sport. But I realized when I started coaching runners as an adult that wasn't the case for everyone. And in fact, the vast majority of recreationally competitive runners don't pay much attention to the elites. And how are you going to know what the elites are doing to be great if you don't pay attention to them? Honestly, that's only one of several reasons that I think recreational athletes really don't. If you look at what the pros do and then what most other runners do, they're almost opposite in terms of training, diet, mental preparation, recovery. And so, I think there are a lot of reasons for that, but one of them is the fact that, by and large, recreational runners just aren't paying attention to the pros.
And I'm guessing from what you've said in the book as well, but that maybe some runners also feel, well, and I guess that's also why you've got that part in brackets is, well, I'm not like them. But you make the point we're actually, more similar than you think. And at the end of the day, we're all human beings. So we can take on the principles.
Yeah, I think, there is, it's understandable, right? Because, the very best runners in the world run amazingly fast for amazingly long distances. And it's easy to think, they're like a different animal from me. But genetics tells us otherwise, actually, that it's only a small handful of genes that separate the elites from the rest of us. And actually, the elites themselves are genetically very different from one another. It's not like you have to have one exact set of genes to become great as an athlete. For the most part, we're the same. We're all human, which means that by and large, the same methods that work for the pros do work for everyone else. Again, the qualifier I always give is that you have to scale. So, the obvious one is that, elite runners run a lot, and they run more than most recreational runners could possibly tolerate or let alone benefit from doing. But still, the underlying principle is not you have to run 180 kilometers per week. The underlying principle is that you should run a lot relative to your own personal limits. And a lot of recreational runners don't even do that. They don't even give themselves permission to run a lot. I'm too slow to deserve to, put more time into it. But my argument is that everyone who has a passion for the sport does deserve to do what it takes to improve.
Yeah. And I agree 100%. Now, you have a section about the 5 rules of pro style planning. Can you sort of give us a little snapshot of that? I know that's a big ask, a little snapshot, but
yes, I actually, without the book in front of me, I can't I can't recall.
All right. Well, don't worry, I've got my book in front of me. I've even got sticky notes. I'll quickly go to that. So the 5 rules you talk about: start where you are, choose a direction. Oh no, that's choose a direction. Almost always do less than you think you could, which I find which I've always said in regards to like speed work, that you should always finish feeling like you could do one more, and don't race too often. I think that's so important, and rest and take breaks.
Yes. So yes, start where you are is, again, like all of these, they sound almost banal, but very few runners actually do each of them. And so, the mistake a lot of runners make is that, let's say, they want to qualify for Boston in the marathon. So they train as if, they know what their qualifying time is, and they train as if they are that athlete already. And that's wrong. The idea is to end up there, but you need to train as the athlete you are today. So you have to sort of look at yourself in the mirror and be very realistic and honest with yourself. This is where I am, and I need to tailor my training to meet me there. Because, even if it sort of feels a little too easy at the beginning, that's great. You've got 20 weeks, before the marathon. So if you always train as the athlete you are today, you will over time become the athlete you want to be. But, again, a lot of athletes make the mistake of jumping ahead. Choosing a direction refers to, obviously, like, running is a goal-focused sport. Like there's an end point. It's not this open-ended, I just want to improve in an amorphous way for eternity. No, there's something out there you want to achieve. And so that establishes the direction of your training. And it's very specific. Marathon fitness isn't the same thing from 5K fitness, which isn't the same thing as obstacle race fitness. So that's what choosing your direction means, just understanding what your endpoint is. And not fixating on the endpoint. That's why I say don't choose an endpoint, because you don't know. Circumstances will determine how far you're able to get in the direction you want to go. But it is very important to know which direction you want to go in. Like, what's the exact flavor of running fitness I'm trying to build here? So that's choose a direction. And was number 3, always do a little less than you think you could?
Yeah.
Yes. So, that one, again, it sounds, I don't know, maybe that sounds counterintuitive.
But I do find that many runners want to do as much as they possibly can,
exactly.
at the time they have available, which seems efficient and seems to make sense,
Yes.
It doesn't always.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the way I like to drive home this point is to say, if you look at an example of an all-time great running performance, so like, Brigid Kosgei running a 2:14:02 marathon for women, or any other sort of like, like incredible outlier performance by an individual athlete. If you look at the training of the athlete who achieved that performance, you will find that things went wrong. That it was not perfect. So, even when someone has done better than any other human has ever done before, their training was not perfect, because it's never perfect, because that is the nature of it. So if you plan for perfection and refuse to back off from that, you're heading for disaster. Because again, like, the best case scenario is imperfect. So it's best, it's not a matter of lowering the bar and saying, let's just try to get a B instead of an A. No, like the goal is to get an A, but the best way to get there is to be a little bit conservative in your planning. Like, have a vision, again, that comes from that honest assessment, looking in the mirror and understanding, like, where you are fitness wise, what you can tolerate, making a plan that is based on that realistic assessment, but then dialing a little bit back from the best case scenario. If everything goes perfectly, this is what I think I could do. Okay, just trust that that's not going to happen, and dial back. So, plan for, 90% of that, not 100%. And, every now and then, things actually go better than expected in training. More often they go worse than expected, and you have to adapt, but sometimes they go better. So, you can be opportunistic. And, if things are going great, you can, just, make your goal paces for certain workouts a little more aggressive, or add, a kilometer or two to your long runs ahead of schedule. So you need to be adaptive no matter what. But if you plan a little bit conservatively, you'll have to make fewer adjustments. You'll have a greater likelihood of just, staying on the rails as you pursue your goal.
Yeah. Now, don't race too often.
Yes. Yeah. So, this is a classic one. I mentioned that, recreational runners do almost everything differently from the elites. And this one is toward the top of the list. Recreational runners, a lot of them want to do a park run every Saturday, and go all out and think that they can improve every time. If you look at elite runners, they race pretty sparingly. Middle distance track runners like milers, when they're in season, they'll race more often because it's a mile. It doesn't take that much out of you. But in looking at them, it's important to understand that racing is how these runners make money. So they are incentivized to race. So it's not like they want to just kick up their heels and race once every 5 years. They need to race to make money. At the same time, they can't afford to race poorly. Like when they do compete, they have to be at the top of their game. So they're actually a great example because they have incentives in both directions to race, but to not race so often that they're not at 100%. So they actually show us how often we should race if we want to be at 100% when we do. I mean, a lot of runners, that's why we log. That's why we get out of bed in the morning and do all the training that's required to be our best. We want to compete. We want to, put that number on our bib. But, the way I look at it is that you can either race often or you can race well. You choose. you can't do both, and it's okay. There's no law against racing often. Yeah. I just want those athletes to be open-eyed and understand that you're compromising your performance by doing that. If you're really more focused on improvement and being your best, then you might need to cut out some of those park runs and be a little more selective in your racing.
And in saying that, how do you feel about, say, like practice races? Do you think it's possible to actually, have like a B race, those sorts of things?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the easy answer and the correct answer is it depends. As a general rule, the shorter the distance of the competition, the more often you can race at that distance. So milers can successfully race more often than 5K runners can successfully race more often than half marathoners, and so on. Yeah. As you go up the chain, it takes you have fewer of those races in you. And if you race at a mix of distances, then you can kind of pragmatically plan an appropriate balance. But yeah, absolutely. There is a time and a place to race at less than 100%. I'm a big fan of actually sort of, rust buster races. Yeah. Because when let's just say you go through, let's just say you're a marathoner and you train for and complete a marathon, and then you take a little bit of a break, and then you have kind of an off season, and then you start to build a base with an eye toward training for your next marathon. Well, a number of weeks have gone by since the last time you really went deep into the pain cave. Yeah. And that's sort of like a muscle you need to train. Like you forget, the women I know tell me it's a lot like childbirth. It is. Because you forget how much it hurt after a certain amount of time. And that's what makes you think about having another child. But to get back to running, it's kind of similar where it can be smart just when you're toward the end of base training and you're almost ready to start getting more specific toward whatever your next important race is, to do, a short race, like, 5K, 8K, 10K, just to remind yourself how much it hurts. And I have found both with myself and other athletes again and again that they get a nice bump in their training from doing that. So the race itself is a little bit of a shit show, because you're not really all that close to peak fitness. It's a little bit premature, but that's fine. You're not looking for a PB in that race. It's a rust buster.
Yeah.
You're just reminding yourself, like, this is what it's like to race. It ain't pretty. And then you sort of come out of that and your mind is recalibrated in a way that allows you to go deeper into the well in your subsequent training.
Yeah. And I agree. It's a good idea to get that out of the way before the important race. So the last one is rest and take breaks. And I find it, you talk about also their relative rest and absolute rest.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. That's another one where, a lot of recreational runners conflate two fundamentally different concepts.
Yeah.
When they think of rest, they think of a day off, a day with no exercise. And very often when I create custom training plans for athletes, one of the most common bits of pushback I get when I deliver one of these custom training plans is, oh my God, you have me going 6 weeks without a rest day. And I explain to them, it's like, there's a difference between rest and recovery.
Yeah.
If you are an athlete with, a pretty solid level of fitness, you can get all the recovery you need to improve without actually resting for an entire day. Because let's just say, you're an athlete who trains on average 11 kilometers per day. Mm. Well, if you're that athlete, and of course it's not that every single day, but let's just say that's the average. So 11 kilometers is just no big deal for you. You do it, almost every day. So for you, if you have a day when you only run 5K, that's a recovery day for you. Yeah. Are you resting? Are you not exercising? No, but that 5K, like a 5K easy run is so easy for you that you're actually processing, absorbing all the training you've done preceding that, and you're ready to go coming out the other side. Now, every athlete needs to take absolute rest days sometimes, even the elites. But the elites make, because what they're trying to do is train right up to their limit, because they're competing against the best in the world. So they can't go over their limit. Yeah. That's disaster. But they want to go right up to it. And so, absolute rest is kind of a blunt instrument. It's kind of a sledgehammer approach. Whereas, if you want to really find your limit, you need kind of more nuanced tools. And relative rest is one of those tools where you don't necessarily have to, go an entire day without training to get the recovery you need. It can just simply be a lighter day where you're still active, but it's lighter.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Also, you talk about, rests between seasons, and like you say here, non-elite runners are far more likely to try to keep the momentum going,
right,
after completing a training cycle, which is something I see too.
Yes, yeah, very common, because a very large fraction of adult competitive runners started as adults, so their background very often, it's not as if they haven't exercised before they became runners, but their exercise experience is more very often in the kind of fitness realm, where I just, I want to look good for the beach or whatever. And the mindset, I call it get fit, stay fit. Yeah. Where you're not, when you're not, chasing PBs, the way, like an athlete does. You're not really an athlete. You're just a person who's exercising. And those goals like weight loss, improving your health, living longer, improving activities of daily living, those are achievable in a sort of open-ended kind of way. So, the general pattern is you aren't exercising, you decide, you know what, this won't do, I need to get fit. Yeah. You get a gym membership, you start exercising, you find a routine that gives you the results you want, and then you just hold steady. Yeah. And then so when these individuals, they transition from that kind of gym-based exercise to running, they take the same mindset with them, where they think when they build up a certain level of fitness, maybe they, let's say they train for their first half marathon, and they're like, wow, I'm fitter than I've ever been. And, in the past, they've always, when they got to a certain level of fitness, they expected to maintain it. With running, you can't do that, because, you're training toward peaks, fitness peaks. You're going up, 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 up. And when you get toward that very peak, right before you taper for a race, you're actually training at a level that is not sustainable for you. It's okay, because you're not going to sustain it. Those 2 weeks of it's, the physiologists refer to it as functional overreaching. Like, you can still adapt to it, but you can't sustain it. Yeah. And so if you try to sustain it, disaster will happen. If you do what the elites do, you build up to that, functional overreaching period, then you taper, then you race, then you take a break, and you start over. And so the period that follows, that little break, is a period where you're voluntarily giving away fitness. And the thing that's very counterintuitive for a lot of runners is that that's the best move you could possibly make for your future as a runner, is to actually get less fit. And it's true, the elites model it for us, but it is counterintuitive for a lot of runners.
Yeah, it is. It is. Now, you also talk about how running seasons us against injury from running, by actually, the consistency. But can you explain further into this concept?
Yeah, it's a subtle concept, because, obviously, so-called overuse injuries are very common in running. And, the simple way to look at it is, running caused the injury. And in a sense, that is true. but the thing is, like, running also prevents injury. It also, running builds the durability that makes injury less likely when you run more. And the way I try to drive home that point is by saying, like who is more likely to get injured after a 20-kilometer run? A runner who runs 20 kilometers every Saturday, or a runner who's never run 20 kilometers before, runner who's never run further than 10 kilometers before? The obvious answer is the runner who's used to doing that. Yeah. And so that drives home the point that, by running, if you've never run before and you go out the door and run 20 kilometers, you're almost certain to get injured, right? So, running, it sort of inoculates you against those injuries. Now, it's a dance constantly, because, it is a high impact activity. So the risk is always there, and that's okay. Just because you get injured doesn't mean you did anything wrong. But, if you're able to just kind of really finesse that dance and listen to your body and develop gradually and take a step back when you need to, the running itself will minimize your risk of getting injured. Where the risk comes is when you make jumps. So beginners get injured often because they're jumping from the couch to running, period. But even an experienced runner can experience an unaccustomed jump in training stress by, suddenly introducing speed workouts that are very aggressive, even though they haven't done a speed workout in 4 weeks, that sort of thing. So consistency is what really is what truly inoculates you against that. If you're always maintaining a pretty high baseline with your running, then your chance of getting injured as a result of taking a jump in your training is minimized.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Now, I know we've discussed previously when we talked about your book 80-20 about the moderate intensity rut, but you sort of talk about that again in this book. For any of those listeners who don't know about this, can you explain that one?
Yeah. When I spent that summer training with the pros in Arizona in 2017, I was able to do, I was quite a bit slower in terms of my race times than, even the women runners on the team. They could blow the doors off me in a race of any distance, but I was able to do my easy runs, which was actually, 80% of the running with, when I first showed up there, I couldn't even keep up. Well, I could have, but it wouldn't have been smart.
Yeah.
With any of them. But, by halfway through, I was able to do my easy runs comfortably with the women on this professional team. And by the end of the summer, I was able to do some of my easy runs with the men on the team without going too hard for myself, even though my marathon time was more than 20 minutes, slower than theirs. And the reason was that they were running at a very, 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 very easy pace relative to their limits.
Yeah.
And so that just goes to show you, and that's the case. It's even more the case in East Africa, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, with, the very best runners on the planet. They do their easy runs, which again account for about 80% of the running at almost laughably slow paces, like, paces that most runners could keep up with. And why? Because it works. And the mistake that most runners make is like, the mindset is sort of like they need to make every run count.
Yes.
Every time I lace up my sneakers, like, yeah, I've got to at least, like, if it doesn't hurt at least a little bit, then how could it possibly be doing me any good? But these professional teams, they train in groups and they're talking the whole time. I witnessed that, not just with that group, but with others. And the reason they can talk is because they're running slow enough to talk. So, and actually there's science showing that threshold of being able to speak, comfortably carry on a conversation aligns with the threshold that separates low intensity from moderate. And so it's really important to be below that threshold when you intend to be. Not all the time. I mean, there is a time to go hard and really suck wind. But when in the 80% of the time when you intend to be at a physiologically low intensity, you should be able to comfortably carry on a conversation. And the research shows that whereas elite runners spend 80% of their time at low intensity, most recreational runners, even like, competitively recreational runners, spend 50% of their time at moderate intensity, which is like, yeah. And so even if you don't run all that much, even if you're like a 50 kilometer a week runner, chances are you're doing like a 50-50 intensity balance. And so you can actually, without even increasing the amount of running you do, shift that 50-50 from an 80-20 in emulation of the pros, and you'll just feel better. And in that 20% of the time when you're supposed to go hard, you'll be able to really outperform what you were able to do when you were always kind of a little bit tired because nothing you ever did was really all that easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're always that little bit tired, you can't go as hard as you need to go when in the quality sessions.
Right. Yeah. Like physically, you're not ready. And also you're just mentally, it's like if every run kind of sucks a little bit, like, can you really go deep into the well? Once a week, it's hard to, even mentally.
Yeah. I believe we've only got like a set amount that we can go into the well, like per week, per month, or whatever it is. And yeah, if you use it all up on your easy runs, then you've got nothing left, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I hear a lot of runners, just generally when you're talking to runners, talking about, their keto diets or vegan or high fat, low carb, whatever it is. I don't know. There's so many. You talk about how the pros tend to eat everything. So can you tell us why it might be more important to focus on eating everything rather than focusing on a specific diet?
Yeah, I mean, this is, diet is a minefield. And so whatever comes out of my mouth now is likely to piss off at
Yep.
least
No doubt.
a fraction of people listening. But I'm just delivering the facts. And it is true. And I've researched this deeply. I've traveled all over the world, sitting down with elite athletes, just looking at what they eat, analyzing what they eat. And it's just fascinating, like in, all continents and across endurance disciplines. So not just running, but, triathlon, swimming, cycling, cross-country skiing, rowing.
Yeah.
There are consistent patterns. And one of them is that, the diets of elite endurance athletes tend to be extremely well-rounded and inclusive, which is almost the opposite. Well, it is the opposite of what like most, fad or popular diets. Most of those diets are defined by restrictions, like, no-go zones, like you can't eat this, you can't eat that. That is not what the elites do. They go out of their way to have very diverse and varied diets in terms of food types, macronutrients, and that is there's kind of I won't go down this road, but there's evolutionary reasons that this makes sense. Like human beings that's what almost makes us different from almost every other species on planet, is that like at every stage of our history, we became more and more omnivorous, more and more diverse in the way we ate, beginning from, when our deep ancestors first came down from the trees to try to live on the ground, it's just like, what was the result of that? The requirement to diversify our diet. So we're really, really good at eating broadly. And when we try to narrow our diet and exclude a lot of things, it's not always impossible, but it's risky. So, there's research showing that people naturally, and it makes sense given our evolutionary history, that we prefer to eat varied diets. And that's one of the reasons that it's hard to sustain very restrictive diets. So this is kind of a good news story. The elites eat everything.
Yeah.
So you can also eat everything and not only get away with it, but your chances of remaining healthy and getting fit are greater if you do.
I mean, I've always believed that if you eliminate a food group, you're going to be eliminating certain parts of nutrition that you actually require. So you'll miss out on minerals or something somewhere.
That's exactly it. And apart from the psychological factor of having to not eat something you enjoy eating.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Now, there's another big difference between pro and everyday runners, and that's the difference in mindset when it comes to bad workouts. Can you tell us what you learned about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the one I could talk all day about, because it's really, I think, I'm assuming here, but I think the average competitive recreational runner who has never met an elite runner probably assumes that what got the elite runner to the level they're at was A, talent, and B, hard work.
Yeah.
And that is true, but it's incomplete. And what becomes strikingly apparent when you spend time around a lot of these athletes is that they are all the same mentally on certain levels. They all have different personalities. They're as individual as anyone else. But it is very clear when you the team in Flagstaff, Arizona that I was with, there were 13 athletes. That's enough athletes to see some common patterns, right? And the pattern that I saw, was actually not like only one of the 13 athletes on that team was considered to be like destined for greatness when he was in high school. like most of them, they obviously you have to have physical talent,
Yes.
to become that goes without saying. But most of the athletes who, go to the Olympics or, finish top 5 in the Boston Marathon or whatever, they were not the top runners in secondary school or at uni. They were a little bit behind those athletes. But, when it became to taking that last step, the decisive factor, the way I look at it is almost like, to become a great runner, you have to slay 2 dragons on the path to that pot of gold that is, greatness as a runner. The first one is you have to have physical talent to slay. Okay, good. You have physical talent, you slay the first dragon, but there's another one. And to slay that dragon, you have to have a certain psychological makeup. You have to have a certain mental wherewithal to slay that second. That is the one that gets you, that last step to the pot of gold. And like there are 2 parts to it. One of them is, for lack of a better word, like toughness, like grit, resilience, that kind of thing. Like absolutely, that is a factor, but that's one's the obvious and celebrated one that everyone kind of knows about. But there's another one, which is the one that your question speaks to, which is it's more like judgment or like horse sense. A good word for it in the psychology research is prudence, actually just making good decisions, like workout after workout, day after day after day. It sounds so, it's just, there's no sizzle to that, but it's like, it's extremely powerful and really underappreciated. Just the capacity to just put your emotions in the background and make smart decisions at key points. And so one of those things, like, when I was with the NAZ elite team, they, the runners on that team, they bailed out of workouts way more often than any of the recreational athletes I coach would ever do. Like if it just, if one of them just had like a flare up of chronic sinus issues, he would quit, a third of the way through a workout. And that would be unthinkable for a lot of recreational runners. They would think, oh, if I can't complete this workout, I can't possibly achieve my goal. Or if I don't complete this workout, I'm not a good runner. Like they overinterpret the consequences of making that decision. When in fact, if you were just like, Lieutenant Commander Spock and had no emotions and were able to look at the situation completely rationally, it's just a matter of live to fight another day. Like, the rational, smart, long-term decision to make is to quit now and be better a week from now. Yeah.
And you also talk about how, the good workouts aren't the flukes, like they don't happen by accident. So pay more attention to them.
Yes. Yeah. That's another matter of like, kind of like, what it comes down to is if, there's a certain, I guess, like sense, internal locus of control and self-efficacy that comes with reaching the highest levels of the sport, where you just trust yourself. And you believe that the answers are inside you and you're not over dependent on external proof that you're on track, external, validation that you're good and getting better, which is extremely important. It's tricky if you don't have it. Acquiring it is easier said than done. But it's worth highlighting that it's a simple fact that, if you have a fantastic workout, if you just knock it out of the park and just have one of those, workouts that you want to tell your kids about, that it can't possibly be an actual miracle or fluke or luck. Like in order to achieve that performance, your body had to have been capable of it. Like
Yes.
that is how fit you are. But if you're training appropriately for any type of running event, you're going to be hugging up against your limit. And as I stated before, it's never going to go perfectly. Like that's how the process is designed. You are pushing yourself. And so you can't push yourself mulishly, just ignoring warning signs that you're doing too much. You have to be adaptive, but in a sort of an optimally planned and executed training cycle, you're going to have a handful of great days. You're going to have a lot of average days, and you're going to have probably more bad days than great days, actually, like if you're doing it right.
Yeah.
And so the mistake that a lot of runners make is that anytime they have a bad day, they take that as they have like a totalizing way of concluding that one workout represents where they are. And where they're going. And elite runners understand that, no, that's just the process. And as long as I don't go too long between great workouts, then I know I'm on track. It's only really the great workouts that tell you how you're doing. And that's just reality. I mean, it's true. I'm not just like telling you a happy story to make you feel good.
Thanks. Yep, that's good. Now, when it comes to racing, how can we be more like pros and deal with race discomfort?
Yeah, that's another Pandora's box. And very personal for me. I mentioned I started running when I was quite young, and for me, I ended up discovering that was a weakness of mine. I had, racing is painful. I mean, this is not tennis. Well, I guess tennis can be painful too, but you know what I mean? Like there's no ball, there's no timeouts, there's no teammates. It's just you alone with your suffering. It's a sport that's not for the faint of heart. There's a great quote that I recite all the time from the former American record holder at 5,000 meters, Bob Kennedy, and I'll have to paraphrase it. But he said, the thing you have to understand about racing is that it hurts. And if you can't accept it, you're not going to get very far. And that just nails it. Like it does hurt. And if you're actually good at hurting, the more, the better you are at hurting, the further you're going to get, and for me, when I was a young runner, I was not good at hurting. I actually burnt out and quit and didn't run for about 8 years and then got back into it in my 20s. And when I did get back into it, I had a monkey on my back because I saw myself as a coward. And because I knew that other runners, were able to do something that I wasn't able to do. And it's really sort of voluntary, right?
It is.
There's no physical limit. You're just making a choice not to go deeper into the pain cave. But for me, even when I'm at a conscious goal, to learn to suffer well as a runner, it took some time, but that was the first step. And I realized for myself, and now I preach that to other athletes who have like, a natural reluctance, to just to go deeper into the pain cave, make it a project, like make it an actual, separate the goal of leaving it all out there from other goals, like, achieving a certain time or finishing in a certain place in your age group. You should be more satisfied if you left it all out there than if you set a PB. And the mechanics of it are kind of secondary to that. The first step is actually to make it a conscious goal for yourself.
Yeah. And so basically just enduring that discomfort means you're more likely to be able to, again,
Yeah, the way I look at it is that each time you start a race, you have there's like a platonic ideal of your perfect performance. Like you are physically capable of something. Almost every runner falls at least 1% short of fulfilling that of 100% of their physical potential. And there can be various limiters. It can be just, dumb mistakes, like a shoe coming untied, but like, pacing is a huge one. That's probably number one is pacing. But number two is, that natural reluctance to hurt, because it is voluntary. And it's like our limit is kind of just, it's fuzzy, because it really isn't the physical. That you should only be at your physical limit when you're 10 meters from the finish line. Other than that, you're up against psychological limits. And those are kind of mutable. You can push them toward that 100%. And so you're leaving, the less willing you are to hurt in pursuit of 100%, the further from 100% of fulfillment of your actual physical potential for the day you're going to get.
Yeah. And like you said, that's where pacing is a big part of it, because if you pace it correctly, you are left, at the end feeling that. But if you have to suffer through the entire race, I guess that makes it even harder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's fascinating. If you look at, there have been studies done where athletes will do some sort of time trial or race, and they will provide subjective ratings of effort. So this is like your perceived effort, like on a 1 to 10 scale, like if 10 is if 1 is a walk in the park and 10 is my absolute limit of how much it could possibly hurt to run. They give ratings at various points along the way in time trials. They've done this with runners, cyclists, others. And in a perfectly executed race, it's linear. So it's like a straight line where obviously when you take the first step of a race of any distance, you should be at a 1. You just started. If you're sprinting, you're doomed, and you're probably not at a 1. But then in a well-executed race, all of the physiological measures are kind of less predictable than that. None of them has that kind of that straight linearity. But that's what you're actually trying to do, is like to comprehend, okay, how much time am I likely to spend going from point A to point B? Yeah. And then how hard should it feel at, point A, point 1 forward? So that's what you're really doing. So yeah, if you're hurting a lot, 20% into a race of any distance, you're doomed again.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I often see, because I tend to do ultras, but you see people going off like they're at park run, going for their 5K PB, and they've still got another, who knows, 80, 90 Ks to go. And it's interesting.
Yes. Well, if you're a fellow competitor in one of those races, you're glad to see it, because you're going to be ahead of them at the finish line. I mean, you're a little bit sad for them, but you're going to beat them.
Yes, that's exactly right. But it's I think it's also a very hard thing for people to control, when they're feeling good on the start line.
Yeah, it is very hard to control. And the way to look at it is that, there's an easy advantage for you in not being that guy or gal. It's right there for the taking, because it doesn't, that's independent of fitness. This is about execution.
Yes.
So you can beat a lot of runners who are, actually fitter than you by seizing that advantage. So that's the way to look at it. Instead of just getting caught up and making the same mistake other people are making, you don't have to pace perfectly, just pace better than the people around you.
Yes, that's a good point.
If you look at it that way, I think it makes it a little easier to like break out of that rut.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. I've really enjoyed this chat. And like I said, I love the book. This is it for people who haven't seen it yet. I find, as always, like I find it easy to read. Like you make it easy to understand the concepts that you're putting across. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. One of the things that's different about this book is that it's co-authored.
Yes.
So Ben Rosario, the coach of the NASE elite team, I've mentioned a few times in this interview, we kind of take turns sharing our perspectives. And I kind of like that because we have different voices. I'm a little bit more scientific. He's a little bit more folksy, I guess.
I like that too. And he would sort of sometimes, like you say, you're more scientific, and he would give the real world application, I guess, of what you were saying, which then I find interesting as well. So where can people get your book?
In your part of the world, I have no idea.
Right, I'll tell them Amazon. So I'll put a link up there. That's where I bought it. So I'm sure there's other places. We have other online bookstores and that sort of stuff, but that's generally my go-to. So I'll put a link up for that. I highly recommend it. So anyway, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast.
Thank you, Isobel. Always enjoy talking to you.
All right. See you later.